Hi, Mike's Carburetor Parts here. Um, I've got this one barrel Carter carburetor here, happens to be a BBS. I thought we're going to rebuild it, but not in this video. But in this video, what I want to do is go over the parts that are in it and maybe explain what some of them do, the names of them, etc. So it gives you a better idea of what's in a carburetor. Most carburetors have the same stuff, similar things. They all have main jets. Most all of them have a idle mixer screw. So let's start with a float bowl. A float bowl, of course, just holds the gas for at a certain level, and what lets the gas in is a needle and seat. Most needles, not this particular one, but most needles have a Viton tip, and incidentally, when you adjust floats, don't put any pressure on it. It'll cause it to leak. Most flooding situations are caused by the needle and seat. There's several reasons for flooding, but needle and seat is one of the primary ones I look for. And the way I test, I blow in the end when the float is closed, just to make sure it's not leaking. And this is a float. This happens to be a double pontoon float. These are pontoons, and they're hooked with, they're soldered right here. Don't ever adjust a float at these points because you'll possibly crack the solder. Brass floats are tested by heating up some water just prior to boiling, immersing the float, and looking for bubbles. Okay. This right here is the pump wheel. There's a check ball in the bottom, that's the intake check, and what that does on most carburetors is by the weight of the gas and the suction of a pump when it comes up pulls gas in through that intake. Now, not all carburetors have check balls at the bottom. Some will feed over through a slot in the bowl here in the wheel and fill up that way. When the pump comes up, it fills it up and gets ready for the next acceleration. Let's see. And one thing I want to mention is the biggest failure on carbs now are the accelerator pump. They go bad because gas doesn't have the oil in it that it used to. So I like to take this crocus cloth, which we do have, by the way. You can order these when you order your kits, and do like that to the wheel to get it as smooth as possible. That way the pump will slide up and down much better. This one, this carburetor happens to have a leather pump, and before you install any leather pumps, you add a couple dabs of oil to it. Don't soak it in oil, that will ruin them. And then when you put it together, when you go to put a pump in, roll it. Otherwise, if you catch the edge and it lifts up, you may ruin the pump. Roll it in there, and the leather pumps takes a while for the gas to swell it up. And pumps don't necessarily have to be real tight. Kind of depends on the carburetor. Most wells are tapered to get smaller at the bottom, so up at top they may seem loose like this one, then as they go down they'll get tighter and tighter. Okay, so while we're on the subject of pumps, this particular pump here has a delayer spring on it. Most pumps do. And what the delayer spring does is actually delays the motion of the accelerator pump when it's going up and down, so it's not herky-jerky. So when you're pushing the accelerator, it'll gradually go down and not jerk. And that's what a delayer spring does. Okay. A lot of them will have return springs that goes in the bottom and helps push that pump up. This particular carb doesn't have one. And the reason for that is the accelerator is open like this, and a spring on the carburetor actually it closes it, so the accelerator pump doesn't need help pushing that pump back up. The spring will pull it up. Okay, so, and this happens to be a retainer for over the spring. A lot of carbs will have these on their accelerator pumps, and that just kind of holds the spring where it's supposed to be. And then I mentioned idle mixer screw here. So what you want to do is, what you don't want to do is screw these in too tight. Most of them will go in through the throttle body here somewhere. Right here is a hole. When you got it on the bench, you turn it in by hand if you can, just until it stops, and don't tighten it too much. These are designed so that if you tighten it too much, it'll score the screw and not the carburetor, because that would ruin the carburetor. So check your screw for any grooves, replace it. Also, are they bent? When you put this on the bench on most carbs, just turn all the way in, then turn it out a turn and a half, and that's where you start and finish your adjustment on the car. We have lots of information on our website about how to adjust idle mixture screws. This is the main jet. Now this one is an old type. We do have some of these jets. Let's see if there's a number on it. I don't see a number on it. So unless you have the build sheet for this particular carburetor, and I don't have it because this carburetor doesn't have a tag. I have no idea which carburetor it is as far as the carburetor number goes. The numbers that are on here are stamped. They're meaningless. They're just core numbers. A lot of jets, anyway, the gas goes through the hole in here. Okay, you can measure a jet if you have a numbered drill bits. It takes a very small one to get in here. That's one way to measure them. A lot of jets will have the numbers, the size stamped on it. For example, a Ford will have, we'll say 55. That means it's 0.055 thousandths. And that's how you want to replace it. When you're up to 5,000 feet or more, you want to reduce your jet size by 0.002, unless you already have. Watch your plugs on jet size. Your plugs should burn light gray or very light brown. If they're whitish color, they're too lean. And if they are blackish color, they're too rich. That's one way to tell whether you got the right jets. Now, jets don't necessarily change, so if you've been running a carburetor in a car for a period of time and you're rebuilding it, you don't just change a jet thinking it's wore out. Now, because only gas goes through them, they don't get much wear, although they could over many years of using them. But the reason you change jets a lot of times is maybe you modified the engine for a little more high performance, or maybe you bought a carburetor off the internet, so then you need to know the site, make sure the jet is going to be okay for your vehicle, etc. So that's the main jet. A lot of going into that. We have a lot of information on our website about jets. This is a retainer for the float in this particular carburetor. It goes in the top. We do carry these, by the way, for the BBS, BBD. The other thing we have here is, here's your idle jet. See, it goes in right here. And gas will come up here, through here with idle, and on some cars, the gas will be mixed up in through these jets before they come out of the into the carburetor. And here is the power valve and metering rod. And what the metering rod does, it goes inside the jet here when it's put together, and it doesn't plug it completely. They're always real loose. They just puts enough in the hole so you don't have so much gas going through. And what happens is, as you step on the gas and you go faster and faster, it pulls that metering rod out, which are often tapered, and allows more fuel to flow through the main jet. Pretty simple, actually. And this is the power valve that controls it, and it's got a spring to push it back up. And the power valve, what happens is the vacuum at idle pulls it down, and the metering rod is all the way down the jet, so restricts the fuel as much as it needs to at idle. And then as you go, the vacuum lessens in the carburetor, and up it goes and pulls that metering rod out. So that's a power valve. Most carburetors have power valves. It may not necessarily look like that one, but basically they all have a power valve of some sort or another. The throttle valve is in your throttle body, and when at idle curb speed, that valve will be closed. Okay, for the most part. And in this case, the spring holds it closed. If it's on the bench, it's going to look like that. When you put on the car and put the spring on, it'll close it up. So a little different. Most carburetors don't use this return spring, and it's closed by default. Usually a spring on the throttle shaft. All right. When it's on the car running, spray some carb cleaner around the openings here in your throttle shaft. To see if it's if the RPM changes, you know you got a vacuum leak there, right? Oh, and back to the accelerator pump. Most are rubber now, and you add a couple drops of lithium grease to it before you put it in. Again, you don't have to soak it. That just helps the lubrication. What else we got here? So talk about a gasket a little bit. This is the gasket for this one. And one thing I'll point out on it is the hole is actually right here, but the hole in the gasket's up here. Well, that's okay because the gas travels through that slot. You see that slot there? So the hole doesn't exactly need to be over here. Now, on this particular model, you may get a gasket that has an extra hole here and an extra hole here. But all it does is nothing. You look at it, and so the gasket would actually be interchangeable because the hole is there, but there's nothing here to allow it to leak, so don't sweat that. So wherever you see a hole, it's either vacuum or bolt. These are bolt holes, or you have a hole here where gas comes through. This happens to be the main discharge on it, on this particular carburetor. So that's the gasket. As you can see, when you have your this particular one, the idle jet goes in here, this actually covers it up. Well, that's because the gas goes that way. It doesn't come out through here. It needs to be covered up. So when you have a gasket and it's covered up, and you wonder why is it covering that hole? Not all holes need to be exposed. So, and then we got the choke system. All right, so when it's cold, the choke is closed. And sometimes you'll have pull-offs, like this one has a pull-off piston in here. You can see that. And what that does is when it's cold and you step on the gas, you don't want the choke to stay closed. You want it to open slightly. Otherwise, it'll choke out, and you're getting too much gas, so you need some more air. So when it's cold and you step on the gas, the choke will open a little bit, and that's the choke pull-off. Pull-off or pull-down, whatever you want to call it. Some people call them vacuum brakes. Now, this one has a pull-down. A lot of these will have a pull-off added to it that also helps pull that choke off when it's cold. So there you go. You always want to check your surfaces with a flat edge to make sure it's all flat. Especially the older carburetor, over time they get warped. You also, it'd be a good idea to run a flat file over these to make sure they're flat. You might have to hit it a little bit on where the bolts go in. Same thing on the, now when we were rebuilding, I always resurfaced where it mounted here. Okay, So you run a flat file over that, make sure so you don't get any exhaust leaks or intake leaks, vacuum leaks, one of those. This is your thermostat, and this particular carburetor, the hot air goes here, through here, and it is sucked in through a vacuum hole in from the housing here, through the housing. This is a thermostatic spring, and when you heat it up, this one, or when you close it, it tightens it up like that, and then as it heats, it'll expand like that and allow that choke to open. Now most thermostats do not open in the choke. They'll close it when you set it, when you're twisting it here, and that closes the choke. But in general, when it gets hot, the thermostat coil will expand and allow the choke to open, and it opens by its own weight through linkage, and also the engine vacuum as it comes through here tries to suck it open. Okay, so in general, also on a lot of carburetors, this one has slots here for these holes, vacuum holes. These are the vacuum holes. Probably go to vacuum advance, and where it needs vacuum, such as the power piston goes. And so you need a little slot in it. A lot of carburetors, you may have these holes, but you get the gasket and it covers them up. Well, that's okay, but if you follow the holes, they generally have a slot inside, and that's actually where they'll feed the vacuum. So if you're covering up the hole, that's fine. This particular carburetor, you can't do that because they don't feed into the inside. Right here is the idle mixture hole going through, and it has a slot that feeds into the idle mixture. Let's see if I can get you, so you can see the slot right here. So as you accelerate, had that backwards. So there's idle right there, that slot is covered up, and as you accelerate, you need a little bit more gas to get off of idle, and that's what that slot does. It's actually connected to the idle circuit, but it allows a little more fuel air in it as you're accelerating. And then at one point, of course, it gets to the accelerator pump, and you're pushing on the gas. The accelerator pump will go down into the well and push gas through the main discharge right here, and puts that extra gas into the throat of the carburetor. Now you especially need this on a cold start. So when you get in a classic car that's carbureted, the first thing you do is you press on the gas one time. What that does is, for one thing, it allows the fast idle to shut off in case it's left with it on. It relaxes the linkage so that it goes to the idle point, curb idle. Lost my train of thought. Oh, okay. So then the other thing it does is, when you press on that gas once, it pushes the accelerator pump down, forces a little extra squirt of gas into the throat of the carburetor, because at cold the carburetor needs a little extra gas to get started. So that's what that does. So accelerator pump is twofold: one for a cold start and one when you hit the throttle. So I mentioned this also. Another good tool to have are these clean out brushes. These are nylon brushes. We have them on our website, and these are great for cleaning out these passages. You want to spend a lot of time, make sure all the passages are clean as you can. See, it gets right in there, cleans out. Ethanol will leave residue in your passages. Also, I like to use this carbon choke cleaner, spray cleaner, and I'll spray that through the hole. And then I always look for, okay, put in this hole, is it coming out through the other end somewhere? And it also helps you know what the holes are for, where they come out of. This particular one, and you can see it coming out through the vacuum advance right there. So there you go. In this carburetor on the choke, I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, it has this metal, sometimes these are plastic, tin, not always available to buy anymore, but this just helps hold the heat in. You can get by without it. It's nice to have it in there. So that's it. So I hope this helps, knowing a little bit how the carburetor works. And like I say, this, if you know with this one, most of them will be the same with a few nuances. But you know, it's all basically the same stuff. All right. So thank you for watching our videos, and I appreciate you watching this one. I'll put some links in the description on some of this stuff. For example, these and the crocus cloth and parts for carburetors, etc. All right. Thank you very much.